Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I'm Shok, the Sultan of CS, the Weaver of Waves, and this is Emelg.
I'm still Emelg.
Week 2 was very interesting for the LCO, so let's go ahead and dive into it. So one of the first games I want to talk about from day one is actually the Kanga vs Order match, not so much for the result, but for what it told me about both teams. I felt like coming out of the draft, it was really clear to me that Order knew what their identity was and had drafted very particularly towards it. On the other hand, I think Kanga looked very lost in what at least I think their player and team identity should be. So what do you think about that?
I'd agree for the most part. I think Order on paper are a very explosive team. Like they have a lot of star power, like we talked about last week on the Matchfix episode 1. I think Kanga are kind of the opposite so far, right? Like they play really slow. They don't really do all that much, or at least so far in the games that we've seen. It's good prospects for Order, right? Because they know what they want to draft. They're playing it to their strengths and they're executing it well.
I think Order, they've picked Evelyn, which is one of Kevy's best champions, into Lee Sin, even if it's not that great a matchup, but he's just really, really good at it. Also, Biopanther, known for these tank v tank matchups, has got himself a set versus Ornn matchup, which I imagine he's very happy with. Kizé, who's known for melee mids, playing the Renekton, and finally you've got Puma. Obviously, we don't know much about Corporal, but I know Puma's always favored these strong laning phase bot lanes, and that's definitely what they got. So I think Order, they've picked champions and styles that they're all very known for. And then going to the other side, I think Kanga, they've done pretty much the complete opposite. However, on the Kanga side of things, they seem really lost in terms of their identity, especially in the drafting phase. Do you kind of agree with that, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think they drafted a really sort of stock standard bland comp. It doesn't really shows that they don't they don't really know their identity, and B that they haven't really leaned into it at all, because on paper they're probably on the weaker side, player diff wise. So I feel they need to sort of have something in their draft that can give them that upper hand that they need to take games off the top teams.
I think I said this before in maybe the first week that I think only Liv and Chungi should have this really strong top side. I think Chungi is very good at enabling junglers, with champs like the TF or the Galio, just champs like that. And Liv has also shown that he's really good with counter picks. He's very strong in lane. He's got a wide champion pool. So when I saw that Lived is the one blind picking Ornn and Chungi is fifth picking Veigar, I hate this. I think it's awful. I think Chungi he's very good at facilitating his junglers, but listen guys, I've been ratioing this guy for years in mid lane. He's not good at counter picking. He's not good in lane. So I really think that, especially on the red side, the Veigar fifth pick was just not worth it. They had basically 3 losing lanes for a pick that, it's pretty decent in the enemy comp, but ultimately it's not worth it. So yeah, I'd like to see a big change from them.
Yeah, when you have 3 losing lanes into an explosive team like Order, the game becomes pretty hard to play, surprisingly. So they pretty much just ended up with Kevy taking over the map, being able to do whatever he wants, scaling for free. And then on the other side, only on Lee Sin wasn't really able to do anything. He can't gank anyone. They kind of just slowly withered away and died until Order broke their nexus.
Definitely the way Kanga lost is very worrisome to me. I think while it is recoverable and somewhat okay to start the split 1-3, I would know. I don't have that high hopes for Kanga turning this around, especially after seeing in their, team profile that 4 of them watch anime. I really, they need to make some big changes, and right now I'm not feeling too good about it.
Yeah, I mean, Lionel's facial hair is still growing back as well, right?
Sure, yeah.
And he did, on Chiefs, he did pretty well when his facial hair was there. So I expect that once it starts to grow back more, they'll start to play better as well.
I hope so.
Another interesting match for the week was Direwolves versus Peace. It was the rookies versus the champions from last year. And I think it's a big decider match for Direwolves, considering they had a loss against Kanga last week. And it's sort of, this match would kind of decide where they'll end up placing on the standings.
I thought Direwolves pretty much picked OCE Exodia, the most just press R, engage, brain dead comp you could possibly pick. That being said, though, I think Peace had really good answers to it. The Gragas and the Graves particularly, I thought were really good answers. So I actually think it was based off the champ select, it was going to be very competitive and interesting game.
A lot of people have been saying that the strong point for Direwolves is their mid jungle with Godo and Kyose. And they did sort of pick 2 champions that fit that narrative, right? They picked Diana Yasuo, a really strong combo. The only question mark is Kyose on Yasuo, right? Because I haven't played solo queue for a while, but when I think Kyose, the last thing that comes to my mind is Yasuo, right? And Yeah, I don't know if he plays the champ. Like after watching the game, I'm pretty sure he still doesn't play the champ. Do you have any thoughts on Yasuo?
Yeah, I mean, I think the champ combination is really good, right? But I think, yeah, you really have to, especially the Yasuo has to execute pretty well, you know? Like, obviously he is just pressing R, but the more fed you get, obviously the more damage it's doing. And
That's
I think Direwolves really fell behind. They kind of, even though there were some times where they got that like really big wombo combo, that Diana and Yasuo just like lacked the damage for it to really be meaningful. If you are Direwolves where you've got that like strong mid jungle that you rely on, and if you're drafting, you know, you're really picking for that as well, you have to play better if you want to win these games.
Yeah, and we kind of saw that like towards the end of the game because they were suffering for like pretty much the whole game, and then they got like one really good combo, pretty much like their perfect fight at the end. Like I think it was like their top lane, and a turret. They were so far behind gold by that point that they still lost the fight anyway. So I guess for them it was like that game. It was just about not bleeding so much to lose your perfect fight, you know, because at that point it's just doomed.
Despite having probably the like harder to execute team comp, I think Peace like did play their team fights really well, especially Lisa. It's like one of those like Chinese Lisa and TikToks, like pretty much just a montage throughout the whole game. So I think like Lisa also played really, really well. Most exciting for me was definitely the Mammoth versus PGG match. I think it was probably the biggest upset we've seen in a while, and definitely joins like the Hall of Fame in OC at least. So what did you think about this game?
Yeah, it was crazy. Like I'm pretty sure I was one of the people, of the huge group of people who bet on Pentanet with my channel points. So they were like 1.3 million channel points or something. And it was like 93-7. So obviously not a lot of people believed in Mammoth. And Twitch usually like fucks around a bit as well. So they're like definitely underdog. So that's when you know like no one really thinks this team can win. So definitely a huge upset. It was pretty weird to watch because Pentanet made like a lot of mistakes that you wouldn't really expect from them, especially since they're still like one of the big dogs coming into the league.
So I have a lot to say about this draft. First, I was really happy to see that the Corki prior has finally gone up. And actually, I was a little bit worried about this because in the pregame interview, Rogue said that no one realized Corki was OP. And like, dude, you have to be fucking joking because everyone knew Corki was ridiculously OP. And I think I really wonder like kind of what's going on like in the OC scrims. Like it could be that whenever Corki's getting picked, he's just getting like kind of destroyed because I think in OC scrims normally like it's very different to stage games, right? Like I think in stage games you generally get away with a bit more of that scaling. You don't get punished as hard as you do in scrims, and then this Corki has come out as kind of like a 1v9 machine.
Yeah.
The Tryndamere being picked as an answer to Corki was really, really good for me to see, and I actually think Mammoth might even have a better read on the meta than Pentanet at this point. I think the two best answers to Corki are the Tryndamere and the Kassadin. I think both scale quite well on their own, but they also do very well in a Corki in the side lane. And I think that helps bring him away from those like grouped 5v5s. So I think that's a really good answer. And I was really, really happy to see a team finally like take the chance and counter Corki.
I mean, I'm like a norms warrior now, right? Like I haven't played solo queue for a few months and I've run into Corki so many times in normals. Like that champion, he's busted.
Yeah.
Like the fact that Pentanet like seemingly didn't know about this. Like I don't know if I didn't watch it, so I don't know if he was joking or not. Like you said, you really do have to wonder like what's going on in their scrims if they're not picking up on stuff like this.
Another pretty interesting thing we saw was the Vladimir red side 5th pick. So what did you think of that?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting pick. Like we don't see Vlad that much at all, really. I think it was a good answer into the Gragas because pretty much he gets to scale for free, and it was like a good pick overall into Pentanet's comp, which was largely like front to back, just like play with the Corki and Jinx at range. So having a Vlad that can like look for flanks and sort of tear up the backline is really good for Mammoth. So spot on.
So typically, kind of regardless of how the draft goes, I think in OC at least the top teams tend to kind of beat the bottom teams anyway, just through kind of like superior player skill. That being said, I don't think PGG's draft is really bad. Like I think they have this like really strong 5v5 composition. So I don't really think their draft is bad. I just think Mammoth kind of came away a bit better. But I do think the game really started to fall apart around that 10-minute mark. There was a time where Corki got solo killed by Tryndamere, and also the Lee Sin and Gragas tried to dive the Vladimir, and I think Gragas died, and Vlad didn't. So I think that's when the game really started to like get out of control for PGG.
It's a play that probably should have worked, but I think they were a bit greedy. I think Winter held his flash on Gragas instead of like like the classic like, E body slam into the cask. I think PGG thought they could get away with a lot more than they actually could have, and that kind of came back to bite them at like several points in the game.
Yeah, a few of the team fights. I remember there was one team fight near the end of the game where Vladimir's like flanking on a ward and Jinx is just standing on a bush, like not moving as the Vlad like walks up to her and flash combos her. I thought that was crazy in the game. Yeah.
Pretty shaky play from Prater. Seemed like he was asleep at the wheel a little bit, especially I think it's pretty funny considering what he said. And like I think it was one of the LCO videos where he said like we could beat Mammoth. Yeah. Like I could play top lane and we'd still beat Mammoth. But he wasn't playing top lane, he was playing his main role and they did not win. So not looking good for him. Pay the stocks going down the gutter. Another thing that came up during the game was Refuri's Tryndamere, which a lot of like pro players had stuff to say about, like stuff like he should have been split pushing, which sort of ties into Mammoth's overall lack of consistent macro. What did you think about that?
Yeah, so we brought this up on my co-stream. Chaz especially was very vocal about this. The Tryndamere oftentimes wasn't pushing the wave all the way to the tower, playing for that split push. There was a lot of like grouping, and I think the Corki could have been punished a lot harder on the side lane.
It's funny that you say that Corki could have been punished a lot more because it was like 0-5 pretty early on in the game. So it really speaks to like what Mammoth could be if they had like learned like the proper macro, like what to do like at that stage of the game when Tryndamere is so strong.
That all being said, I do think like the problems that Tryndamere had this game were something that's like easily fixable. And you saw like Chaz making some tweets about it, like offering to help and stuff. And I thought that was a real like class act. But another thing that it kind of like made me notice was that a lot of teams in other regions, they have like these ex-pro coaches, as the scene kind of grows and matures, you see players like still stay involved. But I think because Oceania has had a lot of its talent go to other regions, not that many teams have the kind of experience that some of the major teams like in major leagues have, where they've got players that have already played multiple years, because I think this is like a very easily identifiable fix. And the fact that it hasn't happened is kind of like, I'm not even sure if it's his fault so much as just it's kind of sad to see the level of experience isn't there to kind of help bring these like newer players into the league.
Yeah, because it really should be like a pretty simple idea of like Tryndamere should split push, right? Like that's kind of ingrained in you from like your silver promos. So yeah, definitely like pretty shocking to see like on a stage game.
Really quick, I'll also bring up that I don't think Fury was the only person in this game that didn't understand their role. I also felt like Yuri's Corki was not too good. I saw times in the early game where he was like ditching mid waves to go roam bot, which I think is just awful on Corki. And I also saw there was like some pretty poor package timings. So maybe it's just because I'm like hyper focusing on it because I'm a mid laner. But I think while Fury somewhat can be forgiven for being a rookie, I really expect a bit more out of like the imported Korean mid.
Goes to show that like Mammoth are playing so sloppy and yet they're still taking like a huge win over PGG. So it brings a lot of question marks to the table, right? It's like how are PGG going in scrims? Is this like, are they getting slaughtered in scrims or like what's going on? Because it is a really big loss, and I think as the weeks go on in the split, it'll like really start to have an impact. We shit on Mammoth a lot. Obviously, like we didn't expect them to be a very good team, but like they do deserve the credit for taking a big win over PGG. I think like obviously Refree got the MVP, but I also think Tryndamere played like especially well on the Vlad. He was kind of like the silent carry in all of those fights.
He was always doing the right thing from what I could see. Like he probably had the best understanding of his champion's identity that game. I think he had a TP flank on Vladimir like just about every fight that was important.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think he played really well as well. Peace versus Order was pretty surprising for me because these were two teams that we said were very similar in skill, kind of around that like third, fourth thing. But it turned out to be just a really one-sided stomp for Peace. So why do you think that was?
Well, I think the team comps that both teams drafted were pretty standard for what you'd expect from each team. Like Peace drafted like Flex top mid, they had Lee Sin, and they had a strong lane for bot lane, and then Order had Biona tank, and then Kevy on Diana, which is like pretty standard pick for him. So I don't think either comp was like necessarily better than the other, and more just came down to who executed it better on the day, and that just turned out to be Peace.
One big thing that happened in the game that was really crazy to me is you saw Tien's Camille roam mid twice and kill Jace twice, and then he still managed to solo kill his lane. And that was like really crazy for a couple of reasons. First, Jace is this really like unforgiving, high execution champion. So if you die a couple times kind of needlessly, it makes your game like really rough for the whole time. On top of that, Camille, after, falling down a level, falling down like 30 CS, from these roams, like where you're sacrificing for the team and then managing to go back top and still solo kill your lane. I think Tian just like absolutely top get bio, and it was like a huge part of why they won the game.
Yeah, he definitely had like a map-wide influence that game. It was pretty crazy. Like somehow he manages to be everywhere and then still like kill his own lane. Just, I don't know, it was a slaughter. So we've been through 2 weeks of games, and like the standings are kind of starting to take shape a little bit, and there's like a lot of interesting stuff to talk about so far. It's definitely not what I think a lot of people would have expected.
I think most people expected Chiefs and PGG to kind of be at that top 2, but Peace has actually taken that spot, with PGG kind of falling a bit below. I think another interesting thing is that we expected Darwils and Kanga to be the ones contesting for that 5th place spot, but at the moment, Mammoth actually kind of looks like they're in position to hold that. So we'll see if they can keep that up. You know, there's some times where teams that are underdogs often can get a few wins early on in the season, whether that's from cheating or from other teams like underestimating them. So we'll see if Mammoth can keep that up. But at the moment, it's definitely very different to what we expected the standings would look like. So yeah, it should be interesting to see how they develop from here on out.
Next week especially will be a big one for Mammoth to see if they can actually like keep up the pace that they built up so far after a 2-0 week. Can they get more wins? Can they break free of the Mammoth curse that is coming 7th and 8th every split? I also think the matchup between Peace and Chiefs, I think they're coming up this week. Definitely going to be a one to watch, so you can snag that 1st place spot first.
On a final note, obviously the teams that like are low on wins, you know, teams that are 1 and 3, it doesn't mean that they can't come back. And at the same time, teams that are currently looking strong, you know, the 4-0 teams, they can definitely fall down. That being said, often the end of the split does come down to that, you know, that last win that makes a difference, either between making playoffs or being, you know, the 3rd place instead of the 2nd. You know, there's a lot of times where it just comes down to that one game. So having that little bit of a safety net from earlier in the split definitely puts you in a really good spot to like clinch yourself in playoffs in a position you really want, basically.
So I came up with a segment where we ask each other 5 rapid fire questions. So you got to answer as fast as you can. And if you think, then you'll cringe, basically. Is that all good?
Sure.
All right, cool. Will Gravitas win a game this split?
No.
Okay, good answer. Old order logo versus new order logo.
I don't even know what the old order logo is. So.
What?
Yeah.
But okay, so does that mean the new order logo?
Yeah, sure. New order logo.
Okay, it's a bit cringe, but whatever. Best all-round mid laner in the LCO?
Appy.
Okay. Should I get a haircut?
Yes.
Fuck, man.
I'm the expert.
And my last question, I think this is the best one. Who would win in a fight, Balkan or Draku?
Oh, Balkan, I think. Sorry, Drake. I don't know, though. It'll be close, okay? It'll be close.
That'd make for a good, like, finals pre-show.
Yeah. I want to come back with better questions because I feel like yours were really good.
Okay.
I actually do think Gravitas will win a game, but it was just more fun to say no.
So players on the LCO definitely didn't disappoint again this week. We had a lot of banger moments. That intro video of Kanga, and they were talking about anime and stuff. I think 4 out of 5 of their team watches anime together. Chungi doesn't.
It's a bit unfortunate, actually, because Chungi, he's the only one on the team that doesn't watch anime.
I think based on their performance this week, probably should spend more time watching VODs as opposed to anime.
Jeez, that was savage. Okay, but listen, I just want Chungi to know that he's not alone, even if he's surrounded by these 4 fucking weebs, man. Just because everyone's telling you that you're wrong doesn't mean that you are. So Chungi, man, don't watch anime. You know, stay strong. I'll be right there with you.
We also had Praetus getting caught off guard with a pop quiz. We had to guess like what zodiac year it was this year.
So Praetus, 2022 is the year of the...
Goose. I researched this stuff last night, yeah. It's that long neck goose. I love that thing.
The 13th zodiac animal, as we all know.
Yeah.
Very close on that one. But then we also had Tally, who actually correctly guessed the number of zodiac star signs there are, which is 12.
How many animals make up the Chinese zodiac?
Ooh. Can I go 12?
Ooh! Well, yes, it is 12 actually. Congrats on getting a
So
win.
well played by Tally. I think he's got high hopes for this year. And of course, you know, the weekly tradition, we had Winter's post-game sort of celebration where he had a blindfold on. He was doing a sleeping Lee Sin cosplay.
Yeah, actually
pretty good.
comes up with new stuff every single time,
Yeah.
man. He's original.
Yeah, I just hope they can pick up more wins so we can see more of those.
True.
All right. Thanks for watching. This has been your Matchfix. Goodbye.
Where are you going?